So our submodalities are the fine structure of what we call modalities. So our modalities are VAKOG, so our visual, auditory, kinesthetic, olfactory, and gustatory. So our 5 senses of which we process and perceive external events, the world around us. So my perception of reality is via my visual sense, my auditory sense, my kinesthetic, my olfactory, and my gustatory senses. Those senses are constantly relaying information. Now, within those 5 modalities, we have what we call the submodalities, which is the fine structure, the fine elements underneath them. So, for instance, if someone thinks about a dog as an example, is that dog black or white or colour in their mind? Is it near or far? Can they see themselves in the picture with the dog, or are they seeing it through their own eyes? All of these different combinations, of which happens with all 5 senses, create what we call submodalities. So it's a structure of our experience, our subjective experience. Now, the fascinating thing with this idea and this concept is that you can actually change submodalities, which changes a person's perception and internal representation of a certain thing. So for instance, when we work with phobias, one of the things that we're trying to do is we're trying to completely manipulate all of the submodalities, and it starts to scramble the pattern. So the person is dissociated in a cinema looking at the cinema screen, and it's going forward in black and white. And then what we get them to do at the end of it is jump into it as if they were there that day, so they see it through their own eyes, and they rewind it in colour. Now, what's happening with this, with the fast phobia cure in NLP is actually we're changing the submodalities constantly. It's forwards dissociated in black and white in the cinema, and then it's rewound in colour, seeing it through their own eyes, associated. That process going backwards and forwards, starts to scramble the submodalities of the phobia, to the point where if it changes, if the submodalities change to any degree, the phobia won't trigger anymore. So as an example, a phobia is like 2 dominoes, a visual and a kinesthetic. So someone that's afraid of spiders, they'll have a picture of a spider, usually really close. The moment you say spider, it bursts up into their awareness. That visual spider creates a kinesthetic response, which is the phobic response. If you can move those dominoes either a little bit further apart or to the left or to the right, the visual domino then doesn't touch the kinesthetic domino, so they still can see a spider, but because you've scrambled those submodalities, you don't get the one that trips the other, and then you don't get the phobic response. The incredible thing about phobias is it can take as little as 5 minutes, if not less sometimes, to remove a phobia that could have been there for most of someone's life. It's a very straightforward technique, but it works with playing with the submodalities. And the same is a different example of how submodalities work. Someone that might have had food poisoning. So you really like curries, and then what happens is you have a really dodgy curry one night, when you've been out, and whether it's the 10 pints of Guinness that you drink before the curry or the curry itself, but then that curry then gives you really, really acute food poisoning. And then what you find with that person, sometimes, not always, is even though they get over the food poisoning and they get better, they can no longer eat curries. They can't even stand the thought of them. And what's actually happened is the submodalities, the coding for curry, has changed in their brain. So even though they know logically that they like the taste of curries, they just had one bad one, they can't even stand the smell or go near it or even think about it in their mind. And that's another example of when the submodalities, the coding in the brain, has changed the person's perception and internal representation of the curry. That internal representation changes their state, how they feel, and that influences their physiology. So suddenly they see a curry and they turn away in balk. And that's because, as I say, the coding has changed.